"Now, son," Earl said as he ejected the spent round from his rifle. The casing dropped with a slight crinkling sound as it disappeared beneath the leaves. "Always remember, nothing goes to waste." The setting sun cast long shadows from the line of trees that stretched across the field in front of their home. This side of 7 years old. The boy looked at his father, assessing the deep lines in his face and the sideburns peppered with white and gray. Earl's red plaid coat hung loose on his thin yet muscular arms. The boy, short for his age, felt even smaller next to him, and his shock of thick black hair bounced as he nodded, wiped snot from his nose, and desperately tried to blink the tears from his eyes. Hoping his father didn't notice, he glanced up and watched as he pulled off his hat, wiped his brow, then pulled it back onto his head. "I know it seems cruel, but son, sometimes life doesn't make sense, and sometimes, well, it's just not fair." Earl propped the gun against the side of the small white house, located off a dirt road on the outskirts of a small North Texas town called Marble Springs. A place surrounded by trees, cut off from the hum of passing cars. Clothes are a big one. Save what you can, also the cash in the wallet. Never use the cards. Always hide the body, and never in the same place or the same way. The boy nodded, looking at the woman at their feet. Her leg jerked for a moment, causing him to gasp. "Just nerves," Earl laughed. "Remember, in this world, we're surrounded by copies." "Copies? Yes," Earl said solemnly, removing his ball cap again. "You're real, and so am I. Your mother?" He waved the cap at her. "She fooled us." The boy looked down at her body, her eyes half open, blood trickling down the corner of her mouth. "They'll pretend to be your friends, but you'll have to know who's real and who isn't." "How?" the boy squeaked. "I'll teach you." Earl smiled. Abe Barrett worked for the city of Marble Springs, a small community recently hit hard by an economic downturn. Scarce jobs became scarcer, and Hart & Sons Liquor and Liquor enjoyed record levels of business. To ease budget woes, the past mayor turned over city work, including Abe's, to a subsidiary of Hart & Sons Inc. Like everyone else in the city, he struggled. But things could be worse. Wow. 2 more than yesterday. Driving home, Abe admired 2 more roadside billboards, put up by grieving families looking for missing kin. Along with a flatlined economy, Marble Springs has a problem with mysterious disappearances. While the town has neither a natural spring nor a supply of valuable marble quarries, Marble Springs boasts a surprising number of missing persons cases. For a population hovering around 38,000, nearly 100 people have simply disappeared since 1987. At least he had smiling faces to look at on the drive home. They always chose smiling pictures for the billboards. As a member of the city's, now Hart & Sons, Parks Department, Abe works with a team dedicated to maintaining the high standard of excellence the Parks Department demands, meaning he keeps the grass cut and trash free. At least the repeal of Mayor John G. Bennington's Make Business Spring in Marble Springs initiative allowed him to enjoy the option of health insurance again. Even if Hart & Sons wasn't too keen on things like living wages and overtime, his shirt stuck to his back via layers of sweat and mulched grass. Abe cranked the AC in his 1989 Honda Civic. Despite being well into October, the heat still bore down on the park maintenance crew with no sign of mercy or respect for changing seasons. Abe discarded his hat, stained with a line of pale salt deposits from months of sweat, onto the floorboard. He was finally heading home for the day. Abe turned into Camelot Apartments, a cluster of buildings in a faux castle design hidden behind a growth of pine trees, and as the car creaked over the concrete speed bumps, he glanced at the complex's newest addition. An overweight man in his mid-50s, perpetually naked, with nothing more than a bath towel covering his shame. Abe waved at Mr. John G. Bennington. "Now that's a shame." The former mayor returned his wave enthusiastically. During the second year of his first term, Mayor Bennington decided to save the town by cutting taxes and unnecessary services, followed by necessary services, followed again by all services. The wealthy rewarded his efforts with record spending, the rest with a ball-peen hammer to the back of the head. The mayor often took evening strolls through the rougher neighborhoods on the east side of Marble Springs to show the economically vulnerable he cared through speed walks along their crumbling asphalt roads. It was here that hammer met head. Fortunately, the mayor's attack did not kill him. Short a wallet and functional short-term memory, Mayor Bennington continued to preside over his community. Unfortunately, the swelling in his brain led to a wave of nonsensical orders, refusal to acknowledge the proper dress code, and no improvement in the latest rash of disappearances. He now lived around the corner from Abe. Abe took a right at the dumpsters and swerved into a spot just in front of Building 2. He looked up at apartment number 239, with the gnarled pecan tree leaning over the roof, bombarding the building in a nightly rain of nuts, twigs, and clumsy squirrels. He turned the key and the engine breathed a final, halting gasp. Jamming the keys into his pocket, he pulled himself from the rust and sky-blue-colored car and slammed the door. Running his hand along the metal railing as he ascended the stairs, the anxiety started to seep in. Abe Barrett had no roommates, on paper at least. But through his current squatters, he learned plenty about the multitude of missing people in Marble Springs. He knew the common explanations, such as UFOs or the monster in Town Lake. He knew the media rarely paid any attention, especially with the 10th anniversary of the 726 on the horizon. He knew the police typically shrugged and said, maybe they left and moved to Dallas, when confronted with the growing tally of vanished citizens. But his roomies had a simpler, more disturbing explanation. A serial killer, operating in an economically depressed town populated with people without the means to donate to campaigns or start businesses. People whom, as far as the town's leaders were concerned, never really existed to begin with. So who would notice if they went missing? Abe's roommates made a lot of sense, he hated to admit. But the reason he feared entering his apartment was because he'd ignored his roommates' requests. As a result, they had stepped up their campaign of terror. Would he be greeted with bleeding walls, or possibly eyeless wraiths and mournful shrieks? Abe took a breath and opened the door. With barely a graze of his hand, the door slowly opened wide with a screech. Now this often happened in the summer, which typically lasted from March until mid-November. During the cold of winter, however, Abe usually had to throw his shoulder into the door to open it. Knowing this did little to ease Abe's nerves. The place was cool, bordering on frigid. Nothing unusual yet. The faint giggle of a child drifted to his ears. "Come on, guys," Abe said, throwing up his hands. "Do we have to play this?" Abe turned to close the door, only to see a spindly figure in the doorway with translucent flesh and a thin dusting of long, unkempt hair. The being opened its mouth wide, gaping and shrieking. Abe fell to the ground and screamed. The door slammed, and the figure dropped to the ground, doubled over and laughing. Abe pulled himself up and watched the figure blur and return to a familiar form. Still tall, but now clad in an old NBA jersey, the name on the back long washed away, the figure appeared as a normal, albeit translucent person. I'm sorry, but admit it," he said. "I gotcha. Fuck off, Michael," Abe said. Michael was pale, his hair eternally bleached at the tips. Michael, like Abe's other roomies, was dead. A woman stepped into the living room through the wall. She appeared to be in her early 30s, wearing a matching gray pantsuit and cropped hair, a trail of blood on her lip. "Hey, can you keep it down? I'm trying to watch my stories." "No, you're not," Michael said. "You're watching the couple in 237 wail on each other." "Yes, exactly," she said, throwing her hands in the air. "Shirley just smashed Kyle's cell, so he can't call the cops. We're definitely going to some dark places tonight, so keep it down." Abe gave a half-hearted wave and sat back down on the floor. "Hello, Diane. We'll talk later," she said, through clenched teeth. "Good to see you too," Abe said as she faded once more into the wall. The first time Abe met his roommates, he was unpacking a box of plates in the kitchen. The apartment was cluttered with boxes, but actually felt homier than it did now. Currently, the place offered visitors a prison-like or possibly asylum-esque aesthetic, with a single living room poster advertising the town's annual ice cream social and Civil War reenactment. A faded blue couch covered in hair from the previous owner's cat, and a TV sitting atop an entertainment center with peeling wood grain contact paper. A tingling sensation traveled the length of his spine, like an insect racing along his backbone as Abe put down the plate he'd just unwrapped from newspaper. He glanced to his right, where he saw a young woman with long dark hair and deep-set laugh lines. It was Caitlin. Thinking back, Abe wasn't sure he ever heard her laugh. Maybe chuckle once, a light snicker or two, typically at Abe's expense, but no laughter. She wasn't taking a horrible form or trying to scare him, but between the translucent quality of her skin and the depression in the back of her head, forever pooling with blood, Abe felt true fear in the form of something warm running down his leg. Actually, Abe did hear Caitlin laugh once, although not sure how long he spent on the floor screaming while Michael, Diane, and Caitlin stood over him. He still remembered pieces of their conversation. Michael was thrilled someone could finally see them. Diane lamented that this someone was an overweight man in his mid-30s with the scream of a 12-year-old girl, while Caitlin simply waved her hands around and yelled, "Ghosts! We're ghosts!" Since then, Abe had become harder, but not impossible to scare. "Your heart slow down yet?" Michael asked. "Not today, okay?" Abe said, removing his work shirt. Caitlin said, "You can't strip in the living room." She said, "We've suffered enough." "This isn't Caitlin's apartment," Abe said. "Besides, I'm not in the mood today." "What's today?" "Her birthday," Abe said. Neither spoke for several seconds. Apparently, being dead didn't automatically make you better at dealing with death. "Sorry about that," Michael said with a shrug. "It's fine," Abe said, forcing a smile. "I might just lay down, you know?" Yeah, that's good." "Hey, before you go, would you mind?" Michael said, with a slight lilt on the last word. "Michael?" Abe rested his hands on his hips. "Abe." Michael imitated him. "I'm going to bed," Abe said. Michael followed him, reminding him in a childish whine that the sun was still out, and his request could be fulfilled in seconds. A few days after Abe completed his initial piss-filled meltdown upon meeting his new roommates, he laid down a few ground rules. The first, no requests. No telling the family they were okay. The second rule, no revenge. The third and final rule? No solving crimes. This created a tense atmosphere in apartment 239. Just a few seconds. What could it hurt? Fine. But I'm not stealing internet just so I can Google shit for you guys all day. Abe sat on the couch and pulled his laptop out from under it. No. Michael stood watching him. "You're stealing it to masturbate to porn," Caitlin told me. "Full disclosure, we've been watching you. You just get in the zone, man." It's almost mesmerizing. Abe did the rounds, checking every one of Michael's acquaintances' forgotten blogs with broken images. Then every social media site he ever had an account on, where he could see his loved ones become experts in epidemiology. Then every corner of the web where people exchange inane chatter and engage in petty flame wars. Nothing. Michael shook his head. Has it been that long? Sorry. Abe closed the laptop, stood up, and returned it to its space under the couch. See you later. Yeah, Michael said before vanishing. Abe didn't mind the small favor or two. Michael and Diane seemed to accept his ground rules. Michael only asked for a weekly social media scan, while Diane wanted Abe to help her enjoy the little things vicariously, such as food. Describe it. Diane would say, it's just a pot pie, Abe would reply. I don't care. Describe it, she would say through gritted teeth, her eyes taking on a red glow. Fine. It has a rough texture. There are carrots. Salt it, Diane would say. What? Salt it. Abe would reach for the shaker and gingerly coat his food. Fuck yeah. Salt it. Ooh, grab the pepper. Only Caitlin refused to accept any little favors. Gliding from the room, whenever Abe searched for reminders of Michael online or described the weather or food to Diane, Abe retired to his bedroom, a continuation of him serving 5 to 10 interior aesthetic. The room contained exactly 3 pieces of furniture: a bed, a TV tray acting as a nightstand, and a dresser. The dresser was empty. The contents were spread across the floor and rarely washed or deposited back into the drawers. The bed was actually from the spare room of his previous place. A 3-bedroom brick home just north of the Marble Springs city limits. Near the end of a small cul-de-sac, his old home offered everything a lower-class pretending their middle-class family could want. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, and neighbors you have to assume are friendly because you've never once spoken to them. Abe missed his home. Not the building, but the people who lived inside. Cliché, but there you have it. After the accident, the house changed. The quiet became oppressive. Every scuff on the hardwood, every stain on the carpet, a reminder of what was lost and what was never coming back. Abe went back once after taking this apartment and shortly after meeting his roommates. He figured if he could see them, what if he could see Rebecca or Gus? What if they were there? The realtor sign was still standing in the tall grass on the front lawn. Hart & Sons, Realty. Abe knew the code and knew the realtor was too lazy to have changed it. He let himself in, and when he shut the door behind him, the blinds bounced off the door and the sound carried into the empty living room. The only thing that greeted him was silence, oppressive, blaring silence. He stayed there for 6 hours, leaving just after sunset. He called out their names, opened every cabinet, threw open every closet door. Even after meeting Diane, Michael, and Caitlin, it was only standing in the empty house that Abe ever felt truly haunted. Prior to setting down his ground rules, Abe decided to bring his ghost friends there. Maybe they could see them if he couldn't, but they saw nothing. Planning the funeral was rough, particularly because Abe was out of his mind with grief. Literally. For his son, he planned what was essentially a birthday party. Everyone would wear hats. There would be cake. The funeral director finally stepped in when Abe was actually checking bounce house rentals on his phone. "I apologize for the wait," Silas Reston said, slipping into the office where Abe was sitting. He was a tall, gaunt man. His hair was white, but his skin was perpetually flushed. His eyes were like tiny dark orbs in the middle of his face. "We recently dismissed our apprentice embalmer, so I'm wearing multiple hats at the moment." Abe actually met the funeral director's former apprentice that day after his mother died. He checked on Rebecca and Gus while Abe signed papers and selected a casket. He later offered his condolences to Abe, patting him on the back and calling him buddy, like he was an old friend. "Mr. Barrett," Silas wheezed, sitting on the side of his desk. "Different people deal with grief in different ways. I know, I've been doing this a long time. Then how am I doing? Abe asked, barely concealing his impatience. Since he learned of the death of his wife and son, Abe had been struggling with an urge to hurt someone, a longing to inflict pain that he had never experienced before. You're losing your damn mind, son. Silas smiled. He placed a hand on Abe's shoulder, giving a slight squeeze. Go home. I don't usually do this, but why don't you let me take this one? You remember your mother's service? Yes. Abe's voice was a whisper. It was nice. Abe's mother departed this world 2 years prior, drained of life by a vampire in the form of a malignant tumor, leaving behind a wasted shell whose last meal was administered by a hospice nurse, a dose of morphine and a sponge soaked with water. Silas roused Abe from his fog. I knew Rebecca. I knew her family. Your boy, very bright from what I heard. Abe nodded, training his eyes on the carpet as the tears blurred his vision. We have the clothes, we have the date. I'll call you if I need anything. Silas led Abe to the door, never removing his hand from Abe's shoulder. Mr. Reston suddenly became a tall, elderly bouncer, escorting Abe from Reston Hart, a new acquisition of Hart & Sons Liquor and Liquor, funeral home. Abe didn't want to go home, of course. So he went to the mall and an hour later found himself in the back of a police car after assaulting the cashier at a pretzel stand. The funeral was beautiful. Flowers, mounds of flowers, wonderful words. Abe declined to speak. The bill was substantial, and soon thereafter, Abe found himself looking for a new home. Believe it or not, the stucco and plaster castle theme wasn't what drew him to Camelot. No, it was the rent. Cheap. Unbelievably cheap. Recently, Camelot had made the national news following the epic explosion of a meth lab in apartment 426. The official report said that only 2 people died in the fire, but the residents claimed the toll had to be higher since many people in the surrounding incinerated apartments were never heard from again. The police disputed this claim. For all we know, a police spokesperson said, his forehead coated in a sheen of sweat in front of the cameras, they just moved to Dallas, cheap rent and a tragic past. Abe was home. Abe opened his eyes an hour before his alarm. Actually, he had woken multiple times every hour, all night long, and he felt it. This had been the case ever since he developed his sleep apnea. Sitting up, he removed the cumbersome CPAP machine, jerked his neck left and right, unleashing a torrent of pops and sharp pulls, then stumbled to the bathroom. After flicking on the light, he examined his reflection in the mirror. He sighed heavily. His clothes no longer fit him. His patchy facial hair was graying, his eyes bloodshot, and his face sagging. He was 35 going on 70. According to the doctor he saw between lapses in insurance, the sleep apnea was brought on because of his sudden weight gain. The weight gain was brought on due to Abe's choosing to bury his pain in trans fats. If there was a silver lining, it was that the sleep disorder afforded him a night free from ghosts. His roommates never slept, but the sound of Abe's snoring drove them away. Literally the worst sound in the world, Diane had said. Like a wolverine raping a muskox, Animal Planet enthusiast Michael had claimed. Abe tried treatment. Dr. Barnes ran a clinic downtown, located between a donut shop and a tarot card reader. Abe slept no better and looked like the unfortunate victim of a facehugger from the film Alien when he used the machine. Abe stared into the mirror. Would he at least bother to shave if he lived in an office? Maybe. What would Rebecca think? Her memory confronted him, as it would frequently throughout the day and night. Abe saw brief flashes of her face and of his son. How? Abe would ask himself. How could I not smell a goddamn gas leak? How did I not know? You stupid son of a bitch, Abe grumbled to himself. It became his mantra. Stepping out of his boxers and into the shower, Abe pulled the curtain shut and tensed up as the cold water hit his back. He heard the bathroom door creak open. "Come on, guys, we set boundaries, remember?" Abe yelled. "No showers." Opening his eyes, Abe saw Diane standing in the shower less than a foot from him. Her arms crossed, mouth pursed shut. Abe throws his palms against the shower wall, struggling not to slip and fall. "Oh my God, Jesus, really, Diane? You said you were getting us cable," Diane said, leaning into his face. "Why do we have to discuss this now? Would you rather talk now, or when you struggle through 10 push-ups before work? Get out of here." Abe screamed, gripping his loofah in his shaking fist. "If I have to see one more ad for Everett Community College or Don Waller, attorney at law, I will find a way to hurt you." Abe dropped the loofah and grabbed his head. "I told you, I don't have the money right now." He heard Caitlin from the bedroom. "Is he using the money excuse again? Tell him to skip a meal. Everybody wins." Turning to reach for the shampoo, he found himself inches from Caitlin's face, still in her green capri pants and white shirt, chewing on her tongue. "Oh my God, what is wrong with you?" he hissed. "It's a simple request. Cable. Satellite, a streaming service, literally any streaming service, and not just the free month, okay? Literally anything. Anything." "Diane, Caitlin, Diane," Abe said, looking back at Diane, who stood behind him defiantly. "I have a meeting today. All right, today. I've been there almost a year. I should get something. Animal Planet." Michael squealed from the bedroom. Picking up his loofah, Abe turned to grab his body wash, only to find his arm elbowed deep through Caitlin's chest. "Shit. Why are you still here?" A chill ran down Abe's arm as he pulled the soap through Caitlin's corporeal body. Caitlin pointed to his soap. "Axe? Really? It's a confidence thing." Caitlin snorted, giving Abe a half-smile. "Will you go, please?" She backed out through the wall. Abe stood in the running water, peeking behind the curtain before adding soap to his loofah. Abe asked them once what death was like. Only Caitlin answered. "It smells like peaches," she said. Finally dressed in his uniform, a pair of grass-stained jeans and a shirt with the city's logo on the front pocket, Abe sat at his kitchen table, chewing languidly on a spoonful of off-brand cereal from a plastic bag with a dancing, pink dinosaur on the front. Caitlin appeared in one of the mismatched chairs surrounding the rickety table. No amount of cardboard bits or coasters could level the table. He did have nicer dining furniture, which remained in storage for a hefty fee of $100 a month. "Avengime," Caitlin said. She impatiently wrapped her fingers soundlessly onto the table. "No." Abe shoveled another spoonful of bran into his mouth. "Please? Come on," Caitlin said, rolling her eyes. "You look at Michael's friend's Facebook for him." "That's different," Abe sighed. "I'm not killing someone. Would you like to know who killed us?" Caitlin asked, attempting to lean back with confidence. "No. And when you try to lean back, the chair just sticks out of your chest." "I hate you," Caitlin hissed as she vanished. A wispy silhouette remained behind for a few seconds before fading from view. "I know. You just don't want to know," Diane said, fading back into view behind him, "because then you'd have to do something about it. Or because you guys are always fucking with me and I don't believe you." Abe stood up and carried his bowl into the kitchen, dropping it into the sink and feeling genuinely surprised the bowl didn't shatter. He grabbed his lunch from the fridge, a box shaped like a smiling dog's face, the only thing he could find at Hart & Son's grocery, and turned on the TV on his way out. The familiar, "I'm Don Waller, the Texas tough attorney," followed him into the hall. "God damn it, Abe," Diane screamed. He smiled and shut the door. "Where the fuck is he?" Michael complained. He flipped open his phone. No texts, no missed calls. In the thick nest of trees behind Camelot Apartments, The chill seeped into his bones. He considered returning to his apartment for a jacket, but knew his luck dictated that he'd only miss Dean. His wallet sagged in the pocket of his shorts, weighed down with several $100s and a variety of small, crinkled bills. Dean should have been here by now. Just as Michael started to leave, a voice drifted into the air. "Copy." Michael stopped. "Dean? Copy." Michael laughed. "Okay, what is this? I'm far too sober to fall for one of your little games." "Copy," the voice screamed. The voice was ragged, as if each letter tore a part of the throat away. "Fuck off, Dean," Michael yelled. Someone tripped and rolled through the bush. Dusting themselves off, the figure stood, holding something under his arm. He set a can on the ground and snapped a mask onto his face. With a hiss, fog cascaded from the can. Michael backed away. "Hey man, so you're not Dean." The figure limped forward. He saw the face, only a small portion was covered by the cheap painter's mask. "Oh Jesus, dude, what's that?" Michael's vision blurred as a sweet aroma invaded his nostrils. He felt his bowels void as he collapsed. "Copy," the figure hissed, dropping to his knees and wrapping his hands around Michael's throat. Michael looked to the ground behind him, Dean's shoes on Dean's legs sticking out of the bushes. Michael opened his mouth but emitted only a choking sound. He willed his body to fight back, tried to fight back, wanted to fight back, but his arms felt as if they weighed 2 tons. Exhausted, the figure stopped and let go of Michael, allowing the blood to rush back to his fingers. His hands felt sore from the cold air. He heard laughter at the edge of the woods, from the direction of the apartment complex. Someone was heading his way. Retrieving a shovel, the figure scanned the grounds for a place to dig. The examination will have to wait. At least he still had the shorter one down the hill, tucked safely in the back seat of his car under an old flannel blanket. He paced the ground until he found the perfect spot and stabbed the shovel blade into the earth. Abe glanced at the names and elaborate drawings of dicks scattered across the building facades in fading spray paint. Downtown was little more than chipped paint and cracked sidewalks, a silent museum to the Great Downturn. It's no Great Depression. One of the older employees had laughed. But it's been around just as long. He pulled in front of the break room. Inside, Abe grabbed his radio and clipped it to his waist, which caused his jeans to sag on one side. He made sure the frequent stops magnet hadn't fallen off the truck and started it up, letting the air conditioner overrun the heat. It was too early in the day to be this hot and too late in the year. The new hire jumped into the truck with Abe and they proceeded to a small park on the east side of town. "So you in high school?" Abe asked. "No. Graduated last year. I'm Andy, by the way. My uncle got me on at the city for a few months before the spring semester," the kid said. He leaned against the door and stared out the window. The kid said. He leaned against the door and stared out the window. "Are all these houses empty?" he asked. "Yeah, it's crazy. Couldn't build enough of these things and the prices kept shooting up. You'd look at house online one day that you couldn't afford, the next you couldn't afford it by 40% more. Then one day, boom, miles of empty neighborhoods no one can afford to live in. But we still maintain the parks. Well, something here should look good." The kid shrugged. The park was a soccer field with 2 picnic tables at the edge of it. At the entrance to the park, 2 massive stone legs, their tops uneven and shattered. The remnants of the great statues that dotted the town in Mayor Bennington's last days as the town's great leader. The other guys in Abe's department milled around the edge of the park, near the tree line. "What's going on over there?" Andy asked. "God only knows," Abe sighed. "Come on." He slammed the door shut on truck number 24. a white pickup with the silhouette pecan tree logo of the city of Marble Springs on the side, and walked towards the others. Andy a step behind. Carl Earp is a slight build, sinewy and friendly. Perpetually smiling, he waved to Abe and Andy. Carl always had a part of wardrobe to stand out from the others. Everyone else wears a city shirt and jeans. Carl wore slacks or an old button version of the city uniform decommissioned years before and immaculately shined shoes. "You want to stand out from the crowd if you want to succeed," Carl would say, planting his hands on his hip. "Yeah, you stand out too much there, buddy," Clay usually replied. Clay was referring to an incident several years ago that caused irreparable harm to Carl's basically non-existent reputation. In 2012, Carl would make the headline in the local paper by claiming he was abducted by extraterrestrials and underwent horrific experiments. The other guy was Clay, who teased him about it incessantly. Standing next to Carl, Clay was an older man, haggard, bald, and thin. He's worked for the city for years. Parks department isn't a bad gig, Abe was telling Andy as they approached his coworkers. "We just do stuff like..." Abe stopped. He saw what the others were staring at. Just past the tree line, a man hung from a branch. He swung slowly back and forth from a nylon rope. Clad in a dress shirt and tie, he was wearing shoes that cost more than Abe made in a month. "Son of a bitch." Clay smirked, dragging out each syllable. "Right by the goddamn soccer field." Clay spit out a glob of snuff. "You know who it is?" Abe asked. His stomach curled in knots, unable to look away from the man's purple face and protruding tongue. "Not a fucking clue." Clay laughed. Wait, I know," Carl squeaked. "The fuck you do, Smiley," Clay said. "No, I remember him from the TV," Carl said, pointing to the swinging corpse. "He's that lawyer from the commercials." "Holy shit, it's Don Waller," Clay agreed, nodding to Carl. Abe looked at the new kid, now green. Carl picked up a rock and tossed it at the body. "Come on, don't do that," Abe said. Clay agreed. "Yeah, that's messed up, Carl, even for you. Sorry, I just felt compelled." "Compelled?" Abe asked. A small pebble bounced off the dead man's leg. "He has a point," Clay said, picking up another rock. "Stop throwing rocks at the TV lawyer," Abe yelled. "Fine." Clay dropped the rocks. "Hey Abe, getting ready for the big barbecue at my place in a couple weeks. You coming?" "Everyone is invited. Can I come?" Carl asked. "No," Clay said. As they argued about invitations to Clay's annual summer barbecue, the new guy never looked away from the corpse. He finally stumbled back and vomited on the ground. Falling to his knees, he continued to dry heave onto the field. Abe walked over to him and put a hand on his back as he watched Clay amble over to his full-sized pickup. Number 47. Abe shook his head. "Throwing rocks at corpses. Just like the days all over again," a phrase the community used to describe the last 3 days of Mayor Bennington's reign. Total anarchy. Fortunately, Hart & Sons security returned order. When Abe looked back toward the hanging man, he was no longer suspended from the tree, but standing under it, his neck broken and sporting a bulge due to the bones nearly tearing through his skin. "You gotta be kidding me." Abe's eyes grew wide. He looked up at the body still swinging in the breeze, then back down to the man's ghost standing underneath his own corpse. Other than his roommates, Abe had never seen another ghost. The ghost of Don Waller, attorney-at-law, nodded to Abe and walked deeper into the brush. Abe's mouth hung open as he watched the ghost move into the dense foliage while Clay returned with a ladder. Clay stood the ladder up and leaned it against the branch Don Waller swung from. "What are you doing?" Abe asked. "Just leave him alone. Can't just leave him up here, goddammit," Clay said. "We're not like those sick fucks during the days, Clay." Abe sighed. "During the days, you burnt down Town Hall and tried to run down the mayor with a riding lawnmower, and I'd do it again." Clay said, taking a step up the ladder. Abe walked closer to Clay, standing beneath the ladder. "Seriously, man, his neck is pretty stretched out." Clay pulled a pocket knife from his back pocket and unfolded it with a snap. First, he heard a cracking sound. Then, sound like someone was ripping a sheet. Abe looked up just in time to see the headless body of Don Waller, attorney at law, falling toward him.